Chairman Michael McKee from Bloomberg Radio and Television. Are you targeting headline inflation now or core inflation? In other words, how far would you chase oil prices if they keep going up, if that's going to be the component that drives expectations? Would you risk recession for a headline rate if the core rate is holding steady or starting to go down?
So we're responsible for inflation in the law, and inflation means headline inflation. So that's our ultimate goal. We, of course, like all central banks do, look very, very carefully at core inflation because it's a much better predictor, and it's a much better predictor of where inflation is going, and it's also more relevant to our tools. As I mentioned, the parts that don't go into core are mostly outside the scope of our tools, so we look at that. But the current situation is particularly difficult because of what I mentioned about expectations. We can't affect. Really, I mean, the energy prices are set by global commodity prices. And most of food, not all of it, but most food prices are pretty heavily influenced by global commodity prices, too, also other things. So we can't really have much of an effect. But we have to be mindful of the potential effect on inflation expectations from headlines. So it's a very difficult situation to be in. And we can't do much about the difference between the elements that make up headline that are not in core.
Could I just, as a follow-up, get a clarification on the SEP? When the members gave their forecasts, when were they inserted into the record? Were they revised after the CPI or Michigan numbers came out? In other words, does the SEP as we have it now reflect the same factors that led you to go to a 75 basis point move?
The SEP is of one piece. It reflects all of the economic readings. It also reflects the 75 basis point increase. This is important. So people had that in hand when their SEPs were submitted. So in other words, it's not in addition to what's in the SEP. The SEP, everyone's SEP reflects their thinking about this rate increase and what's going forward.